What we're looking at in War Thunder is the F-5T SCU. This is a jet fighter in the Thai subtree for the Japanese air tree in rank 7 at battle rating 11.3 for air and 11.0 for ground. This jet gets a full ballistics computer, an EEGS for air combat, a helmet-mounted sight, and the AN/ALR-46V3 radar warning receiver. This is a pretty good RWR for this BR bracket, which detects E through J band targets with signal strength and launch indications. Its radar is the AN/APQ-159. This is a pretty basic I-band radar set with BVR and ACM targeting, but no advanced modes or features of any kind, although notably it does have helmet-mounted targeting at a fairly low BR, and more about that later. The loadouts on the F-5T include a pair of air-to-air missiles and 5 additional hardpoints for various air-to-ground weapons or drop tanks. Its air-to-air missiles are the AIM-9L and the Python 3. The 9L is an all-aspect infrared missile with good overall performance, especially in this BR bracket. The Python 3 is another all-aspect missile with good performance, and really the primary differences here are that the Python 3 is going to pull harder, it's got a sustainer booster to keep its energy for a little longer, and it has a larger warhead, while the 9 Lima is much lighter. It proxies closer to the target, and its tracker activates a fraction of a second faster. This makes the 9L a tiny bit better for point-blank shots. The F-5T can also take a guided anti-tank missile, the AGM-65B. This is a TV-guided version of the Maverick with fairly good range, but just be aware it's a slow weapon, and it sometimes won't be able to one-shot a main battle tank depending on where it impacts. The flight performance of this jet is going to be pretty similar to other upgraded or late-model F-5s, because that's what it is. Speaking generally, the acceleration isn't as strong as most of the other jets at its BR, and its rate of climb is basically average. It maxes out just a little over Mach 1 in typical War Thunder match conditions, but despite all this, it usually doesn't feel underpowered, unless you go vertical. The performance in horizontal maneuvers is excellent, as you can see in some of the footage, and with its combat flaps, it can outturn most of the other jets it goes up against. But in a zoom climb, or even a basic vertical loop, it's gonna run out of steam pretty quickly, again, as you can see in some of the footage. I want to emphasize that in the segment you're watching right now, you really shouldn't allow yourself to get energy trapped like this. I make some of these errors on purpose to show you the results, and even though the EEGS delivered a kill, chasing that guy vertical was a deliberate tactical error, and I hope it's obvious why. The good news remains that, in general, the dogfighting agility of the F-5T is excellent. If you avoid getting energy trapped, the plane will almost never hold you back, and with careful application of the air brake and combat flaps, dogfighting will be fairly easy with this jet. Plus, with only 2 missiles out on the wings, it suffers almost no performance penalty from its loadouts, but with the usual disclaimers that loading up with bombs can still be an issue. When you take this jet into air battles, you've got some disadvantages to mitigate and some advantages you can exploit. The first issue is the lack of any BVR weapons, mainly the lack of any semi-active radar missiles. This basically means that high-altitude standoff attacks are unavailable as a tactic, and if you climb at the start of a match, you're really just putting yourself into a heavily disadvantaged position with almost no way to be effective unless you get lucky and the other team just ignores you, which won't happen. And so your mitigation to this is to fly low. Generally speaking, this is the correct tactic with this jet, and staying low at the opening phase of the match is broadly the right thing to do. However, at lower levels, your basic radar set is far less effective. The F-5T's radar only has regular lookup search mode, with no pulse Doppler or MTI, so it's significantly less useful and effective when you're down hugging the deck. To mitigate this, my suggestion is simply not to use it. Turn it off so it doesn't set off radar warning receivers, or set it into HMD mode for helmet targeting. Again, so it won't set off radar warning receivers, but is also ready to go when you want to fire it up for the EEGS. And that brings us to air combat. The big weakness here is that you've only got 2 air-to-air missiles. Now the good news is that they're both excellent weapons with the differences I mentioned earlier. Still, if the opponent is paying attention, both the 9 Lima and the Python 3 can both be one-flared. And again, you've only got 2 shots. This means that gun combat is going to be significantly more important with the F-5T. Now the silver lining to that is that the combination of the helmet-mounted targeting for the radar and the EEGS make this jet very dangerous up close, especially with how few jets actually get any helmet-mounted targeting at this BR. In terms of ground attack, you can do close air support with the Mavericks or fly in low with bombs and rocket pods. It's not specialized for the role, but it can still get the job done. In air battles, the BLUs can nape out a base if you want, but for my 5 cents, just use this as a fighter. Out in the real world, Thailand has been a fairly prolific user of the F-5 ever since the late 1960s. Over the years, their fleet of F-5s has been upgraded several times as a cost-effective means of maintaining a credible fighter force without spending a lot of money. Starting in the early 2000s, the SCU program, which stands for Second Capability Upgrade, replaced most of the cockpit internals with more modern systems, overhauled the electronics, added a helmet-mounted targeting and display system, and expanded its weapon compatibility again to include the Python 4 air-to-air missile, which, as of making this video, we don't have in the game. Thailand also funded a 3rd capability upgrade program, but that's a story for another time. Visually, it's an F5. If you like the F5, you'll like this one too. No custom paint jobs or anything, but it's not bad to look at and there aren't any glaring visual errors. Landing the plane is pretty basic as far as fast jets go. You can drop gear and landing flaps at over 450 kilometers an hour and it gets a drag shoe. Generally, there aren't any caveats or notes for its landing performance. The cockpit on this jet is pretty good, with the radar warning receiver in a great spot, along with decent visibility, but it's not accurate to the real-world cockpit of this jet, which has additional MFDs and stuff. A minor gripe, and it was still fine in VR. To close out on the F-5T SCU. This jet has really good dogfight missiles. It's got a helmet-mounted sight at a fairly low BR, and it can take guided anti-tank missiles for close air support. However, its top speed is a little below the curve at this BR, its acceleration isn't the best, and it's only got 2 air-to-air missiles. The final verdict on the F-5T SCU is that this jet is a very solid upgrade from the F-5A before it in the tech tree. However, at its BR, it faces some really heavy disadvantages, and I feel like using this jet effectively is more art than science. Still, if you can set up one-on-one engagements, it can be reasonably effective. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you'll like this other one.